The steam off the flat top had a way of getting into everything, my hair, my skin, the seams of the pale yellow uniform Marge made us wear, so that by the end of a shift I smelled like bacon grease and burnt coffee no matter how hard I scrubbed. I'd stopped noticing it around month 4. By the time I'd been at Halloran's a year and a half, the smell felt less like something that clung to me and more like something I was made of. That Tuesday started the way they all did, cold coming up through the cracked linoleum, my sneakers squeaking on it, the old percolator hissing and spitting like it had a grudge. Mr. Petrov was already in the second booth from the door, with his newspaper folded into a tight square, and his chest set up against the napkin dispenser, playing both sides against himself the way he'd done every morning since before I got hired. Adele Cho sat at the counter, nursing the same cup of decaf she nursed for 2 hours, and the Ferraro brothers were hunched over their eggs, work boots tracking in salt from the sidewalk, arguing about the Steelers in that half-affectionate way brothers do. "Warm you up, Mr. Petrov?" I asked, coffee pot already in hand. He didn't look up from the board. "You are a good girl, Nora. Bad at chess, but a good girl." "I've never once played you at chess." "Exactly, wise." I laughed, and it came out real, which surprised me a little because there wasn't much I found funny those days. My mom had passed the winter before last, and my dad long before that, and the apartment I kept above the check-cashing place on Braddock Row was the kind of quiet that got loud if you let it. Halloran's, for all its grease and its broken booth springs, and the fluorescent light over table 6 that never stopped flickering, was the closest thing I had to a living room with people in it. I refilled Mr. Petrov's cup and topped off Adele's decaf, even though she'd tell me she didn't want it, and I hummed while I did it. That was a thing I couldn't seem to stop doing. My father used to hum this old tune while he fixed things around the house, wrenches spread out on a rag, and somewhere along the way I'd absorbed it into my own hands. I didn't even hear myself doing it half the time. Marge said it was good for tips. I did it because it was the one part of him I still had, that I could carry around without it weighing anything. Around 9:30, Marge came barreling out of the back, with her reading glasses pushed up into her steel-gray hair, and a look on her face I'd never seen before. Marge Halloran was 70 years old, and had run that diner for 31 of them, through 2 recessions and 1 divorce, and a fire in 2009, and I genuinely believed nothing could rattle her. "They're coming today," she said. "Who's coming?" "The new owner. His people just called." She stopped in the middle of the floor and turned in a slow circle, taking in the water-stained ceiling tiles and the duct tape on the corner booth and the hand-lettered sign by the register that said, "Cash is king, sorry," in her own crooked print. She'd probably not really looked at any of it in years, the way you stop seeing your own face in the mirror. "Look at this place, Nora. Just look at it." I set the pot down. My stomach did the thing it did whenever the word owner came up, which had been more and more that fall, ever since the building sold. There'd been talk, the kind that traveled up and down the block from the barber shop to the laundromat to us. The whole strip had been bought by some developer. Everybody had a cousin who'd heard something. The bakery 2 doors down had already gotten their notice, rent tripling. 90 days. "I thought they were leaving the diner alone," I said. It came out smaller than I meant it to. So did I. Marge pulled the glasses down onto her nose, and then pushed them back up again, a nervous little loop. "But he's coming to see it himself, and if he decides to gut this place and put in one of those little bars where they charge you $6 for cold coffee in a paper cup and call it a cortado, then I've got nothing to say about it, and neither do you, and neither does anybody." She caught herself, softened. "Wipe down the counter, honey. Get the good creamers out. And do something about that light over 6, would you? Whack it. It hates you less than it hates me." For the next 40 minutes we did the sad, frantic dance of people cleaning a house they might be about to lose. I scrubbed the coffee rings off the counter until my knuckles ached. I wiped down the vinyl on every booth, ran a rag over the ketchup bottles, straightened the sugar packets into their little chrome caddies. Marge threw a tray of her cinnamon buns in the oven, the ones she only made on Sundays because they cost too much to run otherwise, and the whole place filled up with that warm brown sugar smell that almost covered the grease. The Ferraro brothers watched us with the quiet uneasiness of men who understood that whatever was happening to us was already happening to them too. Adele reached over and squeezed my wrist when I passed and didn't say anything. At 10:15, a black SUV pulled up to the curb outside, the clean, expensive kind that looked like it had never once seen road salt, and I felt my heart start going in my chest like a trapped bird. A man got out of the front and opened the back door, and he moved like the men in the movies who are always standing behind somebody more important. Then the important one stepped out onto our cracked sidewalk, and even through the salt-fogged window, I could tell he didn't belong on our block. Tall, a dark overcoat, that fit him the way clothes only fit when someone spent real money making them fit. He stood there for a second just looking at the front of the diner, at the peeling gold letters that spelled Halloran's across the glass, and there was something in the way he held himself that made my mouth go dry. Not stiff exactly, more like a person who was always a half-second ahead of the room, like he'd already counted every exit. "He's young," Marge murmured next to me. I expected some fat old man with a cigar. Not. She didn't finish. He couldn't have been much past his mid-30s. Dark hair with a little gray starting at the temples, a hard, clean jaw, and even from across the room. When he pushed through the door and the bell over it jingled, I could see his eyes going over the place, cataloging it, pricing it, taking inventory of us. "Mr. Rourke," said the man who'd come in behind him, quietly. "This is the diner, I can see that, Danny." His voice was low and even. He unbuttoned his coat with one hand. Marge stepped forward with her whole body arranged into welcome, her Sunday smile bolted on. "Mr. Rourke, welcome, welcome. Marge Halloran. This is my place. Was my place is. Can I get you a coffee? A cinnamon bun? I'm fine, thank you." Not unkind, just closed like a door with the deadbolt already thrown. He walked a slow line down the length of the diner, and everybody's eyes followed him, and the Ferraro brothers stopped chewing, and Mr. Petrov set down a chess piece with a click that sounded very loud. I don't know why I did what I did next. I've turned it over 1,000 times since. Maybe because Marge's smile was cracking, and I couldn't stand to watch it. Maybe because he looked, under all that money and all that stillness, like a man who hadn't had a decent cup of coffee in a long time and didn't know it. Maybe I just didn't think, which is the truest answer. I picked up the pot and a clean cup, and I walked right up to him, and I set the cup down on the counter next to where he'd stopped, and I filled it. "On the house," I said. "You look cold, and whatever you decide about this place, you can at least decide it with something warm in you first." I was humming. I realized it a beat too late, that old tune of my dad's, low under my breath the way I always did, and I stopped embarrassed, my face going hot. He looked at me, really looked, for the first time since he'd walked in, and something moved behind his eyes that I couldn't read. He picked up the cup, he held it a second, and then he actually drank it. This man who'd waved off Marge like she was offering him something suspect. He drank the free diner coffee I'd handed him, and for just a moment the whole hard, careful shape of him loosened. "That's a terrible cup of coffee," he said. "I know," I said. "It's the worst in the neighborhood, but we're consistent." The corner of his mouth did something, not a smile. The rumor of one. "What were you humming? Was I? Sorry, habit." I felt myself flush again. "It's just something my dad used to hum. I don't even know the name of it." He set the cup down slowly. He looked at it, and then at me, and then, strangely, out the window at the street, like there was something out there only he could see. "Keep the pot warm," he said finally, to no one in particular, and he walked back toward Marge and the man named Danny, and I stood there with my heart going, and no idea what had just happened. He didn't announce anything that day. He looked at the kitchen, at the walk-in, at the books. Marge nervously pulled out for him, and he left in the black SUV, and the whole diner exhaled at once when the door shut behind him. Marge sat down hard in the corner booth and put her face in her hands, and I brought her one of her own cinnamon buns, and she laughed a wet laugh and said, "Well, he drank Nora's coffee. Maybe we've got a shot." 3 days later, a man in a suit came in and asked for me by name, and handed me a cream-colored envelope with my name on it in a hand I didn't recognize, and drove away before I could ask a single question. Inside was a card, and on the card, in the same slanted handwriting, "Miss Ellison, I have a proposition that is not about coffee. My office Thursday 2 p.m., A. Rourke," and a business card underneath. Heavy stock, just a name and a number, Rourke Development Group. I almost didn't go. I want to be honest about that. Everything about it felt like walking into a story that didn't have a good ending for someone like me. But Marge, when I showed her the card, got very quiet and then said, "Nora, when a man with that kind of money asks a girl like you to his office, it's one of two things, and I don't get the sense he's the second kind. Go. And call me the second you're out." The lobby of Rourke Development had a floor so polished I could see the water stains on my own coat reflected in it. A woman at a curved white desk looked at my thrift store boots and then made her face very smooth and told me to take the elevator to 22. The elevator had a mirror in it, and I made myself not look. He was standing at the window when I came in, the whole gray sweep of the river and the bridges laid out behind him, and when he turned around he looked, if anything, more imposing there than he had in our diner. In our world, he'd been a wrong thing in the right place. Here he was exactly where he belonged, and it made me feel every inch of the distance between us. "Miss Ellison, thank you for coming. Nora's fine," I said, because Ms. Ellison sounded like someone's tax accountant. "Nora," he said it like he was checking whether it fit. "Sit, please." I sat. I kept my hands in my lap so I wouldn't fidget. "I'm closing Halloran's," he said, and my heart dropped straight through that polished floor. But then he kept going. "The building's coming down. All of it. The bakery, the barber shop, the whole strip. I'm putting up mixed use. Housing, retail, ground floor commercial." He watched me while he said it, watched it land. "But I've been thinking about that ground floor. And I've been thinking, since Tuesday, that a neighborhood loses something when the last place its people can afford to sit turns into a bank branch. I want to put a diner back in, a real one. Better bones, fair prices, the same door open to the same people. And I want somebody running it who understands why that matters. Not a chef I fly in. Somebody from the block." I stared at him. "You want Marge to." "Marge told me on Tuesday she's retiring the second she has the money to. Which, if I do this right, she now will." He came around the desk and leaned against the front of it, closer to my level, and I understood it was a deliberate thing, a lowering. "I'm offering you the job, Nora. General manager, you'd build it. Menu, hires, the feel of the room, I'd fund it. There's a signing bonus to get you on your feet." He named a number, and I actually stopped breathing, because it was more money than I'd made in the last 2 years combined. And a salary that means you never again decide between the light bill and dinner. Which, forgive me, I'd guess you've done. "You don't know anything about me," I said, and it came out sharper than I meant. "No," he agreed, unbothered. "But I know you handed a stranger a free cup of coffee because he looked cold, in a place that couldn't afford to give anything away for free. That told me more than a resume would." He paused. "I'm rarely wrong about people. It's the one thing my life has required me to be good at." There was something under that last sentence. Some weight I didn't have the vocabulary for yet. I didn't hear it then. I would learn to later. I called Marge from the sidewalk, shaking, and she cried, and then I cried, and a man walking his dog gave us a wide berth. The next week's folded time up strange. The bonus hit my account and I refreshed the banking app, maybe 50 times convinced it was a glitch. Halloran served its last plate of eggs on a raw gray morning in November, and all of us stood around after close with the chairs up on the tables, Marge and me and Mr. Petrov and Adele and the Ferraro brothers who'd shut off the truck to be there, and we passed around one last pot of that terrible coffee and pretended none of us were crying. Marge pressed the diner's original hand-lettered menu board into my arms. 31 years of daily specials chalked and erased on the same square of slate, and told me to hang it wherever I ended up. Mr. Petrov gave me a chess set. "So you will finally learn," he said. "So somebody in this family knows how to see 3 moves out." I told him I wasn't his family, and he told me not to be an idiot. Building the new place put me next to Adrian more than I'd expected. He was in every meeting, not hovering, but there, asking questions I didn't know how to answer, and then waiting patiently, while I figured out that I did. He'd call at odd hours about a supplier. He'd show up at the construction site in a suit that cost more than my car, and stand in the dust arguing tile with me like it mattered. And to him I slowly understood. It genuinely did. I told myself it was professional. I told myself the way my pulse jumped when his name came up on my phone was about the money on the line, about how much I couldn't afford to lose this. There was a night, early on, when we'd worked late over the floor plans, and he had his driver take me home, and he rode along even though it was miles out of his way, and when we pulled up in front of my building, with its busted intercom, and the mattress somebody had left by the dumpster, I felt shame come up my throat so fast I nearly choked on it. "Thank you for the ride," I said, hand already on the door. "Nora." His voice stopped me. When I turned back, he wasn't looking at the building the way I'd braced for. He was looking at me. "There's nothing out there," he nodded at the street, "that you need to apologize for. Where a person starts isn't who they are." "I'd know. You keep saying things like that," I said. "I'd know. Like there's a whole story you're not telling." Something closed and opened again behind his eyes, quick, like a shutter. "Good night, Nora," he said, gentle, and it wasn't an answer, and we both knew it. We opened in the spring. We called it the second light, which had been Adele's idea. From something about how the good hours of a day come around twice if you're lucky. And it was everything I'd let myself hope for and hadn't dared say out loud. The old regulars found us within a week. Mr. Petrov claimed a booth by the window and set up his chessboard, and told the new customers, with tremendous authority, that he'd been coming here for decades, which was technically a lie and technically not. Adele took her decaf slow. The Ferraro brothers grumbled about the prices being a whole $1 higher, and came every single morning anyway. I hung Marge's old chalkboard by the register, and I wrote the day's special on it in her crooked style, and some mornings I swore I could still smell her cinnamon buns. Adrian came to the opening and stood at the back, out of the light, watching everything with those careful dark eyes, and when he caught me looking at him across the crowded room, he didn't smile so much as let his face admit that he was happy, which on him was almost the same as a shout. After the last customer left that night, he stayed and helped me put the chairs up, this man who owned half the block, stacking chairs, and it undid something in me to watch it. "You did this," he said quietly, wiping down a table he had no business wiping. "We did this," I said. "You wrote the checks. You made it a place people want to be. I've built 40 buildings, Nora. I've never once made a place people wanted to be." He straightened up. The room was dim, just the light over the counter, and the air between us had gone thick with something I'd been refusing to name for months. He said, "Nora, there's something I have to tell you. Something you should know before." And my phone rang. It was Marge, calling from Florida, where she'd moved to be near her sister, and I felt a hot stab of guilt because I'd barely called her since the opening. And I looked at Adrian and he stepped back, and the moment closed like water over a stone. "Take it," he said. "It's fine, it'll keep." It didn't keep. That was the thing. If I'd let it ring, if I'd let him say it right then in the warm dim of the place we'd built, I've wondered whether the rest of it would have gone differently. Probably not. But I've wondered, because 2 weeks later they came for me. I'd stayed late doing the books. It was near midnight, and the street was empty, and I was locking the front door, when 2 men I'd never seen stepped out of a car that had no reason to be idling on our block at that hour. They didn't rush. That was the worst part, how slow they were, how sure. One of them said my name, my full name, in a friendly voice that made my skin crawl, and the other one said we should take a ride. That there was a man who wanted to have a conversation about Adrian Rourke. I don't remember deciding to scream. I remember the Ferraro brothers' truck was still parked up the block because they'd left it overnight, and I remember running toward the light of the 24-hour laundromat on the corner, and I remember a hand closing on my arm and then, impossibly, headlights. And Danny, Adrian's Danny, coming out of a car I hadn't known was watching, and everything after it is fragments. Raised voices, the 2 men getting back in their car. Danny's hand steady on my shoulder, walking me inside, telling me to breathe, telling me he'd been outside every night for 3 weeks, and I hadn't known. Adrian arrived within the hour. He came through the door of the second light, white to the lips, and he crossed the room to me so fast, and then he stopped a foot away like he'd hit glass, his hands half raised, not touching me, like he'd lost the right to. "Are you hurt?" he said. It wasn't a question. It was a thing being wrenched out of him. "No. Danny." My voice didn't work right. "Adrian. Who were they? They said your name. They said you'd know." He sat down across from me in Mr. Petrov's booth and put his face in his hands for a second, and when he lifted it, he looked older. "I need to tell you the thing I've been trying to tell you for months," he said, "and you're going to want to leave when I'm done, and I need you to know that I will understand if you do." And he told me. He'd grown up 2 neighborhoods over from mine, he said, in a worse version of it, in the kind of poverty that isn't a phase you pass through, but a country you're born a citizen of. He'd wanted out so badly it had made him reckless. And when he was young and hungry and had a plan for his first real building and no bank in the city would touch him, a man had loaned him the money. A man named Vernon Slade. "You have to understand who Slade is," Adrian said low. "He wasn't a banker. He is a man who moves money for people who can't be seen moving it. Loans, at rates that own you. Favors that come due for the rest of your life. I knew what he was when I took his money. I told myself I'd pay it back and be clean and never look back. His jaw worked. I paid it back. Every cent with the interest he set, which was obscene. But men like Slade, Nora, you don't get to just finish with them. You paid. That means you were useful once. And useful people, they hold on to, so I could barely make the words. "You're a criminal. I was in bed with them," he said, and he didn't flinch from it, which somehow made it worse. For years at the start, I laundered a plan into a legitimate building, and then another, and I told myself each one was the last favor. It took me a decade to get all the way out. I've spent the last 5 years cutting every thread, paying off every debt, making myself so publicly clean that even Slade's people started to leave me alone. I've been good, Nora, not because I'm a good man. Because I decided I wanted to become one, and that's the only kind of good that ever meant anything. He looked at his hands, and then I walked into a diner to price a demolition, and a girl who had nothing gave me something for free and hummed a song her dead father used to hum, and He stopped. I let myself want a life. I let myself want you. And in doing that, I painted a target on you, because Slade's people saw it too. They always see what you love. That's the only leverage that's ever worked on anyone. The room was very quiet. My heart was breaking, and I couldn't have told you for whom. "So I'm the leverage," I said flatly. "Yes. And how many of them are there? How many Vernon Slades from your old life are still out there waiting to grab me off a sidewalk to send you a message?" "I don't know," he said, and God help me. The honesty of it hurt worse than any lie would have. I've tried to close every door, but I don't know. I stood up. I needed the floor under me, needed to move. I need to go home. Let me put security on you until this is... You already had security on me. It came out cracked for 3 weeks. Watching my building, and you never told me why. You let me feel safe because you didn't want me to run before you were ready to catch me. I pressed the heels of my hands to my eyes. I'm not saying no to the guards. I'm not stupid. Those men were real. But I need you to not call me Adrian. Don't text me. I'll come to you when I've got my head on straight. Right now I can't even look at you without seeing all the doors. I didn't know I'd already walked through. He nodded. He didn't argue. That was the thing that stayed with me on the silent drive home with Danny 2 cars back. That he didn't fight for himself even a little, like a man who'd already decided he deserved whatever I handed him. I lasted 6 days. 6 days of jumping at the intercom, of the guard in the unmarked car who tipped his coffee cup at me every morning, of standing at the second light watching Mr. Petrov lose to himself, and thinking I could lose this. I could lose all of this over a debt a scared kid took out 20 years ago. 6 days of being furious. And then on the 7th day my phone lit up with Danny's name, not Adrian's, and Danny's voice was doing something careful and terrible, and he said Adrian had been shot. I don't remember the drive to the hospital. I remember the waiting room chairs were the same orange as the booths at Old Halloran's, and I fixed on that stupid detail because it was the only thing that would hold still. I remember Danny telling me it hadn't been Slade's people, that it had been one man, alone, a man Adrian had out of a deal 15 years ago who'd been nursing it into a poison ever since, and that Adrian was in surgery, and that he'd come out of it. They thought. He came out of it. They let me in near dawn, and he looked so wrong in that bed, this man who was always a half-second ahead of every room, hooked to machines, gray, small. His eyes opened when I came in, and something crossed his face that I'd been too proud and too scared to let myself see before, and it broke the last thing in me that was still trying to hold. "You came," he said. His voice was sandpaper. "You said you needed space. I did need space." I sat down on the edge of the bed, careful of the tubes, and I took his hand, the one that wasn't wired to anything. Turns out space isn't the same as gone. He told me the rest of it then, in that ruined voice, the whole map of who he'd been, the people his old deals had hurt. Not with his own hands, he said, but with predatory loans and cleared-out blocks, and the cold arithmetic of men who put a number over everybody's name. "I can't undo it," he said. The second light, the fair rents in the new building, the ones I take a loss on. It's not penance. There's no penance. It's just the only direction I know how to walk that's away from what I was. I know, I said. I've watched you walk it. You're a good man, Adrian, even when you can't stand to believe it. Especially then. He pulled me down against his good side, careful, and I fit myself there, mindful of every bandage. And he said into my hair, I've loved you since you handed me the worst cup of coffee in the neighborhood. I'll love you if you walk out of here right now. I'm not walking anywhere, I said, and I felt him breathe out like a man setting down something he'd carried too far. Stop trying to give me the exit. I'm not going to take it. We figure the rest out together or not at all. He called me Songbird for the first time then, quiet, half asleep from the medication. From the humming I hadn't realized I'd started doing over him, the way I'd hum over a full pot in the early morning. And it stuck, and it's what he's called me ever since. Vernon Slade came to the hospital 2 days later, alone, unarmed. I was there, and I understood the second he filled the doorway why people spent their lives afraid of him. He carried menace the way other men carry a wallet, casual, always on him, nothing to prove. Rourke, he said, and his accent was old country under the flat American on top. Somebody puts a bullet in you, and this is how I learn we're not so finished as I thought. Adrian pushed himself up straighter, and I saw the cost of it in his face. If you're here to take credit. Bah, Slade waved a heavy hand. If I decide to kill you, Thomas, he used Adrian's middle name, a deliberate little intimacy, a reminder of how far back he went. You'll know it's from me. There'll be no mystery about it. I don't do this. His eyes moved to me then, slow weighing, and I made myself not look away. You've found something, he said, almost to himself. A reason. That changes the math on a man. Leave her out of whatever you. I come to give, not to take. Slade moved to the window and looked out at the gray river the way Adrian had looked out our diner window, months and a lifetime ago. The man who shot you, Ray Cutter. He works, when he works, for Gideon Frost. You remember Frost. Adrian went very still. The Caro Street deal. Frost thinks you cheated him out of what was his. 15 years he's kept it warm. He's not a man who cools. Slade turned back around and his face gave away nothing. I tell you this for 2 reasons. Frost is sloppy. Sloppy brings police, brings attention, and attention is bad for everyone's business, including mine. And, the smallest pause, because once, a long time ago, when you were nothing and nobody would touch you, I gave you money no bank in this country would give, and you paid it back. Every cent on time, and you never once cried about my terms. In my world that makes a man rare. He moved toward the door. I remember being young and hungry and having one person take a chance on me when they didn't have to. You did me a good turn without knowing it years back in the Delgado matter. This clears it. At the threshold he stopped. You want out of this life for good, Thomas? Then understand. You don't get out by avoiding the threat. Frost will come again. That's a certainty. What you do about a certainty is the one choice no one can make for you. And then he was gone, and Adrian and I sat in the machine hum quiet for a long time. What did he mean? I finally asked. About the choice. Adrian looked at the ceiling. He means I have 3 ways to go. Spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next Ray Cutter. Try to buy off Gideon Frost, which won't work, because Frost doesn't want money. He wants me to hurt the way he's hurt. Or, he stopped. Or you become the thing you spent 5 years trying to stop being, I said quietly. Yes. He closed his eyes. 1 phone call to a man I used to know. Frost stops being a problem, and I lose everything I've built myself into, because a man who does that is a man who was never really out at all. I'd be back in Slade's world by morning, and I'd have chosen it, which is worse than being dragged. I thought about Marge's chalkboard hanging by our register. I thought about Mr. Petrov teaching me to see 3 moves out. I thought about who Adrian was in that dim room the night we opened, stacking chairs he owned, and who he'd been the morning he drank my terrible coffee, and about how the whole distance between those 2 men was the distance he'd walked away from Vernon Slade, on purpose, 1 hard step at a time. Don't make that call, I said. He opened his eyes. You take Slade's information and you give it to the police, I said, the real ones. Cutter, Frost, all of it. You let it cost you. The past coming out, the reporters, all of it. You let the light in on the whole thing instead of putting 1 more body in the dark. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. Because the day you make that call is the day I lose the man I actually love, and get back some ghost of who you used to be. And I didn't fall for the ghost, Adrian. I fell for the man who wipes down tables he owns. He looked at me for a long, long moment. And then, ruined and gray and full of stitches, he laughed. This wrecked, helpless laugh I'd never heard from him. You, he said, are going to be a disaster for the way I've done everything my whole life. Good, I said. So that's what we did. And it wasn't clean, and it wasn't fast. There were federal people, and a lot of very bad weeks, and a stretch where the papers had Adrian's whole past spread out under headlines that made my stomach turn. Gideon Frost was arrested on a Tuesday, which felt like a small private joke the universe was making just for me. Ray Cutter took a deal and named names. Vernon Slade was never so much as questioned, and I've made my peace with the fact that some kinds of debt in this world never come due, and I try not to think about what it means that his information is the reason I still have Adrian at all. Adrian was gone a while, wrapped up in it, in lawyers and testimony, and the slow public work of turning himself all the way inside out. I ran the second light. We opened a second one across the river in a neighborhood the banks had written off. Same rules, fair rents. The door opened to the same kind of people it had always been open to. I trained a whole staff, Mr. Petrov finally got me to where I could beat him 1 game in 10, and he pretended to be furious about it, which meant he was proud. Adrian came back to me on a bright, cold morning near the end of it all, thinner, quieter, the case finally closing behind him. His company was smaller now, restructured into something so transparent it was practically made of glass, but it was still standing, and so was he. We drove back over the bridge into the city, and I asked him what he wanted to do first, now that it was over, now that he could do anything. He thought about it, and then he gave me the real smile, the rare one, the one I'd chased across 100 rooms without ever quite catching until that second. I want to go to the second light, he said. I want to sit in the corner booth, and I want you to bring me the worst cup of coffee in the neighborhood, and I want to watch you work, and hum, and be somewhere that people come, because they want to. Not because they owe anybody anything. His voice went rough. I spent 30 years in rooms where everyone was there to take something. I'd like to sit in the other kind for a while, so that's what we did. He took the booth by the window that the regulars had started calling Mr. Rourke's table while he was away, next to Mr. Petrov's, and Mr. Petrov gravely offered him a game, and gravely beat him, and Adrian took it like a man who'd learned there were worse things to lose. I brought him coffee in one of Marge's old mismatched mugs that I'd kept. Around us the place hummed with its Tuesday morning noise, the percolator hissing its grudge, the Ferraro brothers arguing sports, Adele nursing her decaf into its second hour, the light over the corner table flickering the way it always would because some things you just live with. I caught his eye across the room, and I thought about the girl who'd handed a cold stranger a free cup because she couldn't stand to watch someone go without a little warmth. How she'd had no idea, none at all, that she was setting the whole rest of her life in motion. I thought about all the doors I'd walked through without knowing they were doors. Adrian lifted the mug to me, a small quiet toast across the noise. And this time I smiled at him first, on purpose, and I hummed my father's old tune loud enough for him to hear it, and I understood at last that some accidents aren't accidents at all. Some of them are just the future, wearing the plainest possible disguise, waiting on a cold morning for somebody kind enough to hand it a cup of coffee.